So in the early 80s, I was doing the research for my master's thesis for UCLA. Late 80s, it was for my dissertation research for Berkeley. Then I went home and I wrote my dissertation and I got my doctorate and I had my son all at the same time. So single mother, but had my son. I was finishing my dissertation with my son sitting on my lap. So then I was, raised my son, was working full-time from 2 weeks after he was born, working in America. And then things started falling apart in Yugoslavia. So the early 1990s, Yugoslavia is falling apart. One by one, the republics are seceding. And we are watching what's going on, especially in Bosnia, and the massacres and the camps. It was so tragic and horrific. So then I actually was living in, I was doing research with Albanians in the Bronx because I couldn't go to Kosovo. So we were living in New Jersey and working in the Bronx with Albanians. Illyria was the newspaper, Albanian newspaper in the Bronx. There was a huge Albanian community there. So I organized a conference in New York at Columbia University on Kosovo with all of the many Kosovar who had left or were in America at the time. Anyway, so I was keeping really very much still researching Kosovo and very involved in Kosovo in the early 90s, but never thinking I could go back because of Yugoslavia was on fire. Yugoslavia was torn up and it was all war. Then one day in 1994, Oxfam called me, Oxfam being a humanitarian aid organization from England. Mm-hmm. And they called me and they said, we heard about you. Would you like to go back to Kosovo and try to run a humanitarian aid project? And I said, now? This is 94. It's parallel society. I knew everything going on in Kosovo, and they said, yeah, go do a study, go do an assessment, see if it's possible. I said, well, yeah, I'm there. So I took my son, 4 years old, and we went down to the Yugoslav embassy in Washington, D.C., drove down there, and they're like, why do you want to go to Kosovo? I said, oh, we're just tourists, just want to go. And somehow they gave me a visa. I have no idea. I brought my son with me. Well, I'm just a mother and we just have friends and we want to go speaking Serbian at the Yugoslav embassy. And I got a visa somehow. Come back here and the situation, I still was living, then we got a place in Taslice. But I was first doing an assessment, and so the Serbs were running everything. It was apartheid. It was parallel society. It was incredibly difficult, everything, obviously. So I had to report to the Minister of Health. Serbian Ministry of Health was going to give me permission to be here. And they said, okay, you are going to work on sanitation and water problems in the county of Vitia. Didn't even know where, which is ironic, as actually the first time I was ever in Kosovo was in the county of Vitia. But I hadn't been there since. So I said, okay. So I go out there and do some preliminary investigation. What could possibly be done here? Yes, we have these problems with water, bad water in the schools. So my job, my mandat, was to fix water and sanitation in grammar schools in Vitia. That's all. And if I did that, then I could stay in Kosovo. So I go and do some research, and yes, it seems like definitely there is what to do, and it's possible. So then I go back to America, I report to Oxfam, and they say, well, okay, let's do it. Let's go forward with a project. Oxfam wanted to be, a lot of organizations wanted to be a presence in Kosovo. They wanted to monitor what was going on. And one way to do that was to do an aid project, because they wanted the international community to be on the ground in Kosovo so that Albanians were not alone with the Serbs, basically. I mean, that's the way I think of it. So I got the job to go work in Kosovo, in Vitia. So then I hired Cemal Murati, was my right-hand person. I hired an engineer, a local engineer, Feriz, and we set to work figuring out what to do. So eventually we worked in 30 villages in Vitia, and then at the end also in Gilan. And we worked in the schools at the beginning, and we would go and build a new well or build an outhouse, and I know the Serbian, dvokomorna septička jama, 2-chamber septic pits. So it was these septic pit ideas to clean up all the filth at the grammar schools. It was really a horrible situation, and many of people's outhouses, vetse, were outside, and they dumped onto the village stream, which was completely horrific. So this is what we were trying to fix. It's the only way we could be in Kosovo, was to do the job we were allowed to do. But then, after getting used to the place and doing these projects, we started fixing the schools. Maybe in Grmov, that first village, the roof was falling down on the heads of the kids. I mean, you could see the sky through the roof. Everything was really bad in these schools. I mean, really bad. So we started fixing the schools, but I had no mandate to do this. Legally, we had no permission to do this. We had no building permits, we had nothing. We just did it. It was all illegal, but actually. But we said, I'm American, we're just gonna do this. We didn't have money for the projects. I had money to live here and a vehicle and a few staff people. But the money for the projects I had to raise from the villagers. So we would go around, you know, one Deutschmark. Can you give 1 Deutschmark? Can you give 5 Deutschmarks? And a lot of people had Gerbet, you know, and we'd go to them, can you? So this was difficult. This was villagers doing the work. So this is not Oxfam coming in. This is just me from Oxfam. But the villagers had to raise the money and do the work. And this is a time when no one wanted to do anything. This is no civil society. I mean, they had their Mother Teresa clinics and a parallel society, parallel school and all of that. But people weren't very inspired to fix anything, right? Because they didn't know what was happening to them. They were hoping for independence, and at that time, I didn't see it coming. I said, you know, you better just get going and fix your villages, because you don't know when or if you're ever going to be independent. I didn't see it coming. So, you know, the situation in Kosovo was horrible, impossible. And many of the people we were working with were out of a job because they were kicked out of their jobs. So they had nothing to live on. So a lot of poverty in these villages, and we were trying to get help for them. I mean, we would bring donations of shoes and clothes from England at that time because there was such poverty in the villages. So the thing that we experienced, though, was this solidarity. My job was really to go to each village and make meetings in the mosque or in Oda and talk to the women together, talk to the men, and say, let's fix your village. Let's do this. Let's fix this school, or let's fix the sanitation, or let's clean this up. When their minds weren't there at all. You know, but the situation was filthy, was terrible. Let's do this. And my job was to inspire them to do this and to get them all wanting to do it. But there were many, Vitia has a mixed Albanian-Serbian neighborhoods, villages. So that made it very difficult. You had schools that were Serbian-Albanian. So the Albanians in the morning, Serbs in the afternoon, or kundrazi, or they divided the building. So if we wanted to build a septic pit, which is a big, big job, who's going to dig? Who's going to lay the concrete? The Serbs? The Albanians? Two directors. So one school would have 2 directors, Serbian and Albanian, who had never spoken in 4 years. If you can believe that. In a village, there's one water source, one spigot. And here's an Albanian woman, here's a Serbian woman. just coming to get water and not speaking. And they're, you know, of course, they had spoken for hundreds of years, but now no. And so it was incredibly difficult situation. But there became this kind of solidarity that we started experiencing, and people got this vroom, like, yes, we can do this. And here, oh, we fixed this school, let's do another school. Then we realized that high school girls were not going to high school. Girls of that age in Vitina, many families had stopped their girls from going to high school. And this is a complicated thing. You could write a book about this. It was very interesting what was going on, because they would say to us, well, it's because the Serbs are on the buses and we're worried about our girls because of the Serbs. But when you dig deeper, it wasn't that. Essentially what it was is there was no work because all the Albanians had been put out of jobs. It was very hard to get a job. Girls who were going to be working women, village or city, working women, if a family would say, okay, we're going to have a nuse who is intellectuale, meaning she had been to school and she was going to be working. That's a very different kind of nuse than a nuse who has not been to school and is just going to be home. Those are very different kind of women, very different kind of families who have, or, you know, who bring in these women. You might have a mix in a family, but it was, so these are very different lives. If a woman is going to go and be a working woman, a modern Albanian woman at the time, it's okay if she's been to high school. She's been seeing boys who aren't related to her in banked classes in her classroom. And that's okay. She's going to be working and that's her life. She's a different kind of woman. But if she's going to be shtëpiake, if she's going to be a traditional Albanian woman, she can't have been at high school with boys. Because then her reputation isn't perfect, or might not be. So that was sort of what was really inside of all this, was if our women are not going to have jobs because there are no jobs now, they've kind of gone to high school. But they would give all kinds of excuses, you know, we don't have the money to send them on the bus, or we can't afford a burek, they have to be at school eating. And we would say, well, how much do you spend on cigarettes a month? And we would total it, you know, how many Deutschmarks at that time on cigarettes? Well, it's 10 marks a month or whatever, 5 marks. That's exactly what she needs. You can't tell me you don't have the money. And then some of them would say, if Ibrahim Rugova, because everyone believed in him and anything he said, if he tells us he tells me to send my daughter to school, I will do it. So I would go because I knew Ibrahim Rugova from my days at Institut Almanologjike. O Ibrahim, kemi do burat në viti, në mal, që s'podojnë me quqikat në shkollë. A mund më shkruar një letër? Edhe ka shkruar. Edhe kemi pas letër për Ibrahim Rugova. Jemi kthy, do thot kemi hec në përkrejt mall. You know, we're walking through the neighborhoods in the snow. You know, going house to house. We knew which houses were not sending the girls to school. And okay, well, we can't because her father is in Geneva. And there's no one who can give her permission. So I go to Geneva and I go to Zurich and I'm talking to the men there and I'm saying, what is the deal? And I always was saying, ju po doni mu kanë pjesë të Evropës, e po leni gratë në Arabi. Çka jeni ty bo? Qysh me hec përpara, qysh me hec një Kosovë, me Evropë, modern, një vend i ri në Kosovë, kur e ke you know, a whole generation of women who have not been to school. What are you thinking? So that was what I was doing. So we did all these projects that, you know, ministry shouldn't cease. Absolutely. Then I was teaching English to some village kids. So we did all kinds of projects in Viti that had nothing to do with sanitation. And most of all, we started a women's group. Legenda. They named themselves Legenda, the legend. And it was a group of mostly women in their early 20s, some women in their 30s, 40s, but mostly sort of 18, 19, 20, 21. And what was amazing is that in every village we always found about 2 women, young women, who were just kind of like, yeah, there's something besides Ches. They just got it. When we came in there and talked to the women, they kind of were like, yeah, I want to help you. I want to do something. Always 2. It was so amazing that just had that little spark of, you know what, there's something beyond Ches and living and this life that is predetermined. So they became Legenda. 2 women, 3 women, maybe from every village, and then we started Edukim Shinditsore. So we would organize these meetings every 2 weeks for the women to come out of their house, usually to the school, to the grammar school, or to maybe a mosque, but we would have these lessons on why breastfeeding is important, because at that time many women were not breastfeeding because it was considered modern, or they thought they should use, you know, formula, and so there was a huge epidemic of diarrhea of kids because they were using bad water and formula. And so it's things like that, or secondhand smoke and how it affects kids. If kids are sitting in an oda with, you know, 10 men smoking, what is that like for babies? Just basic things, high blood pressure and things like that. But the most important thing was getting women out of their houses together to meet in a place. So this is what the activista, we call them, these women in Legenda, they were called activists, and their job was to go talk to every house in their village, talk to every group of women and get them to come to the meetings, which was very difficult. For many women, they just had never gone out except for a dosim, a funeral or something where they had to leave the house. So these meetings were incredible, and the women who were in Legenda, their lives changed forever, and they are now lawyers and professors, and all of their lives changed. They all went, and in the war they were refugees. They went in Vitia. They went over the border to to Skopje, over that mountain there. But it stuck. After the war, they still had Legenda, and. So our life then at that time, my son and I were living with a family when we were in Vitia. We had a place in Taslija, but when we were in the field, we lived with a family, the Tafa family in Terpez, the village of Terpez, near Klokot. Everybody knows Klokot, Banja Klokotit. Right next to that is Terpez. So Klokot was a Serbian village. Terpez, an Albanian, mostly Albanian village. And we lived with this family that had 21 people in it. So it was still an extended family. Some of the brothers were in Germany, but some were home. And there were 13 kids in this house. One house. Not like fancy big house, just one house. Each family had one little room. And there was a room that we could stay in. And it was fabulous. It was a beautiful family. And that was like our family. And my kid got to hang out with 13 kids and just run all over the place and, make mischief everywhere. And so that was an extraordinary experience, being with that family. And the old man, the father, Zoti Spies, Elmi, God rest him, God rest his soul. And Ljokja, the mother, they were alive, and they were from a different generation. So I had long talks with Elmi, who was real Shqiptar. He told me stories of having hiked through Albania as a young man, World War II, and the way his mind worked was the logic that his mind followed. And I found this in many older people in Albania. Their logic works differently. It was very hard for me to follow where he was taking me when he was talking. Anyway, so those were extraordinary experiences. And a lot about Gurbet, again, because some of the brothers were away and one of the wives was still there with her husband away, and that was very difficult because the other women had their husbands home, and the difference that made. And so anyway, that was my experience in the 1990s. The women in that family had never gone to the school, the grammar school. They each had 4, 5, or 6 kids, and they had never been to the school where their kids were, and they lived. You could see it from their house, and they had never been. out to there. So anyway, the experience of the 1990s was extraordinary because we were able to get Albanians together for a common cause. There was no political parties deciding what way you thought about things. Everybody was together making things happen. And then the end of the story is I was going, you know, we were really doing amazing projects, and I had by that time a truck, and I had all these Albanian girls playing deaf, and we would, you know, drive through these villages, and there's the Serbian police watching us all the time. And I'm sure they thought that my meetings in the villages, my meetings with men especially, were raising money for arms for the KLA. I'm sure they thought. So we were talking about, you know, septic pits and school roofs and things, but they didn't know what I was. They were watching me do all this. And then one time in 1997, all our programs were going great, and we had brought experts from abroad. I had a woman who was an engineer, an environmental engineer, who had come to work with me on the projects. It was great. I mean, we were really, like many projects in the 90s, you know, it was real civil society. It was fantastic what we were able to do in 3 years. And then I went to get my passport, my visa renewed at the SUP in Pristina, the police, and they just stamped denied on my passport, denied. And that meant I had to leave. So, and I had to leave quickly. So all our lives, I thought my son would go to high school here. I mean, we were here to stay, and we had to leave. And all the foreigners, there were a lot of foreigners then because all the aid groups were here. There were 17 international NGOs working here, and they all had to leave. Basically, one by one, the Serbians expelled us all. And I tried to stay. We tried to do a switch of a Serbian in America who was trying to get back or something. We tried in Beograd. I tried again in Zurich. I tried again in New York, and I was not able ever to come back. So then I gave up. And then because of my aid work in Vitia, I really learned how to do humanitarian aid, which was not my profession. I was an anthropologist. And the people I was working with from other aid agencies, Red Cross, they didn't know Kosovo. They knew humanitarian aid. They had lived in Africa. They had done many other projects, but they didn't know Kosovo. And I knew this place. And when a villager told me, well, my daughter can't go to school because of the Serbs, I knew it wasn't true. And I couldn't, you know, because I could speak the language, and they couldn't. I knew what was going on, and that was an incredible advantage. But then I really learned that my heart was in humanitarian aid. So I had spent a decade in anthropology, but from then on, from that experience in Kosovo in the 1990s, I never was an academician again. My heart was from then on in humanitarian aid, and it has been ever since. So I went back to America and worked for different aid groups. And now, after starting my own NGO in California, developing it and working in Rwanda and Ukraine for now 11 years, and I'm still working in Rwanda because I can really make something happen without living there. I have a team in Rwanda, and we do holistic aid of every kind with the 28 communities there. But you know, that to me is what life is about, is helping communities that are struggling to survive. I don't need to do that in Kosovo. Now, Kosovo Women's Network, everybody's got it going on in Kosovo. They know how to solve problems in Kosovo. So now my work is very different here. My aid work is in Rwanda and Ukraine. But I am back to live in Kosovo, and I've settled back here, hopefully for the rest of my life, just because I love it here. There's many things I don't love about it, but pretty much I'm able to navigate my life so that I am with the people and the projects and the work and the places that I really love. What I don't love is the jealousy and competitiveness of people, especially women. Well, and men. Men, especially, well, in any part of this society, In anthropology, there's a term called the limited good. And that means a society where we feel that there's a numeri kufizuar. There's a limited amount of water. Let's say you're in the Middle East. There's a limited amount of water, or a limited amount of land, or a limited amount of resources, or honor, or reputation, or wealth. And if you have it, I don't have it. And that puts us in competition. So in Kosovo, it's jobs. It's jobs with good wages, it's reputations, and I understand why people are in competition. But it's so interesting, I feel that people don't share information because they want to hold on to things that they have written or discovered or ideas that they have. They're not sharing ideas. They're not coming together to solve problems. I mean, I only know small parts of Kosovo, but one part I know is the Women's Network, Kosovo Women's Network, Reineck. They are the best. I mean, they know exactly how to solve problems and how to get women to work together to solve their problems, wherever they are in Kosovo. But my experience generally is that people feel they're in competition, and women are gossiping a lot and talking behind each other's backs and very critical of each other, which is a horrible thing to see, you know. So I pretty much stay with the people who are not like that. And then I've started World Dance for Humanity here, which is an organization I started in 2010 in California. And I teach dance. I'm 70 years old now, but in California I was teaching 6 days a week. Here I teach 3 days a week. And we brought women together for these dance classes, just for fun. But it's also a space where women are not competitive and not critical, and nobody cares what you look like or who you are, or if you're katunar or chutatar, or if you have a job, fancy job. Nobody cares. Nobody knows and nobody cares. And we all just come together to do dances from Kosovo and Albania and Greece and Georgia and Hawaii and everywhere, and just have a good time. And the money that they pay for the little bit of money for the classes goes to humanitarian aid. So we've helped in Rwanda since September we started. We've helped in Rwanda and Ukraine and Kosovo, a family that has no money in Fushkosov. And now with the fires in California, which have burned down my town, where I come from. So it's an extraordinary thing that I didn't know if it would work, this concept of World Dance for Humanity, and it absolutely has worked. And the women love it, and I love it, and everyone has made new friends, and it's this non-competitive, non-judgmental human experience that we've created together.
Janet, thank you so much for your time.
How long was that?